Welcome to another Pint with Seaniebee. It is a rainy end of summer day in London. We're in a little garden in the back of a hotel, hiding under an umbrella and hoping it doesn't start pissing it down. I have a very interesting guest today, all the way from Slovakia, my first Slovakian guest.
Yay.
And she's a actor, dancer, model and singer. She's also involved in sort of jazz-psych, hip-hop music, which is something that I really don't know an awful lot about. So I'm very kind of virginal in this conversation here, and she's going to have to lead me through it. She's recently been the lead singer of a very famous musical collective called Heliocentrics. They've just released a new album called A World of Masks, where she is the vocalist on it, and they're a band or a collective that have not used vocalists in the past, and she has been coined as the missing link for this band.
Hey.
Her name is Barbora Patkova, and she is from Bratislava. Those of you from America who don't know your geography, don't know where that is. That's in Slovakia, which used to be part of Czechoslovakia when they separated. I'm welcoming to the podcast Barbora Patkova.
Hello.
How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm really well, thank you, for a Monday.
Have you been on a podcast before?
Yeah, I've had some interviews. I don't know if they were podcasts, but yeah, I've done a few.
Barbara is going to share some of her music with us today as well, so we'll probably have a couple of musical intervals, which will be nice to hear. Tell me what it was like for you growing up in Bratislava, or did you grow up there?
Yeah, I was born there. It's a kind of a funny story because my parents have met. There is this telecommunications tower, and it's sort of in the middle of the city, but the city kind of goes around it. So you can see it from all parts of the city. It's an amazing place. You can go up there and there's a viewing point, and from the top it's got a spinning restaurant and you can see the whole of Bratislava.
Right.
And it's where the tower is the beginning of the Carpathian mountains, which turns into the Tatras through Poland, goes all the way to the Black Sea. It's a big mountain range dividing Poland and Czech and Slovakia now as one country at one point. And that's where my parents met. Then my grandfather used to teach how to ski jump there because it was kind of the beginning of national parks.
Right.
So it was in Bratislava, in the capital, but we were in a forest. So I grew up in a forest.
Okay.
So the whole communication thing and the music thing and what I do is kind of my parents met in a telecommunications tower.
Yes.
And that's kind of the journey that I went up.
So when you say grew up in the woods, like where was your school? Was that far away?
My school was on the edge of the city, very small school, and quite often I didn't have to go to school because in the winter, if a tree fell over the road, because there was no buses, if we didn't show up to school, they didn't really bother because they knew it was the kids up from the woods. Like, obviously we couldn't, there was sometimes we couldn't make it. And
were you seen as the weird kids from the woods?
No, not really.
But you were living and growing up in nature, which
yeah.
Hence, compared to the kids today, which are
I think hence kind of where part of my life journey is I've actually trained as an ecologist. I have a degree in ecology.
Really?
Music kind of overtaken. But music's always been in my life as well. But I think a lot of my lyrics are kind of about the mysticism of nature and our relation to it. And I think
how did you get into music when you said it was part of your life from a young age? Were your parents involved in music? Or?
I was always that annoying kid who's always singing and everyone's telling me to shut up. And there's this picture of me when I'm about 3 or 4. And I think it really epitomizes like who I am, which is like, I've got this sort of grey stockings on, and when you're a kid, they kind of hang over your feet, and I've got this white kind of wife beater vest, and I'm on a table in the living room going, woo!
You were a ragamuffin.
Yeah, and my dad's in the background turning the radio, and I'm dancing on a table.
Brilliant.
And since when I was a little kid, like at Christmas, I do this thing where I'd be like, I do a performance for my family at Christmas. So I just go off and learn songs, and then I recite them in front of the fireplace, and it was all like my own initiative. But no one ever really quite sort of took that seriously on board, I think, and kind of...
Did you have a dream to be a singer?
No. I just loved music, and I was always writing little lyrics, and it was really a way of expressing myself.
Yeah.
But I never thought I'd be a musician. The thing is, I come from a very... I don't like the whole class thing, but, there was maybe one person out of my own family that went to university, and that's my grand auntie. And, my mum never finished a degree, my dad never did. They're successful people in their own right. It wasn't something that seemed possible when I was growing up. My grandma was a cleaner, and my auntie's a cook, and my dad's a cook, and
And they grew up. I mean, you were around the time of the separation when Czechoslovakia split. Yeah, what was that like?
I mean, I was a kid. I grew up in communism, but only until I was about like 8 or 9 or something like that. thing is, even after communism ended, it didn't quite end.
Yeah,
The people who were in the government in Slovakia now are people who were in the communist government. They just changed T-shirts and they were like, yeah, we're liberals now. You know, I still remember the times when you'd have a shop. It wasn't like now you have supermarkets and stuff. I mean, I didn't grow up having Bounty and Coca-Cola and all those products. We just didn't have that. But in a way, we lived really healthy because all the produce was made in Slovakia and there was no mad additives and all that kind of pre-cooked food. And, you know, so in a way, it was a good, healthy start. And then I went to, you know, when I was 16, I left the country and it was, you know, I just went on holiday and I never returned.
So tell me what happened with that. What circumstances did you leave?
Well, the funny story again is, like, when I was a kid, I used to have this little suitcase, and whenever people pissed me off, mostly my family, I'd pack it in and I'd be like, you know what, guys, I hate you right now, I'll see you later. And I'd walked off with my little suitcase. And my mum said sometimes I'd go quite far.
Right.
And she had to get the car and, you know, go and get me. And I was just off. I was like, I'm not having this.
Did you have a little teddy in there as well?
Yeah. My mum still has it. I just put all my little things, snacks.
An apple and a teddy and a piece of cheese.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need you. I'm up. And then basically...
But like, were you unhappy or did you feel constricted there? Or what was
I hated authority. And I think that's the way I'm weaving through my life is I'm kind of my own boss in life, and I do my own thing and I do it my way, and I do it very differently to a lot of people, but I feel it satisfies me, and that's kind of how I want to do things. So I didn't like authority. I hated school. I mean, literally, like, and not
always getting suspended.
Yeah, totally. Like, I was writing, you know, do the letters like ABC, and then I'd close my book, and the teacher would be like, Barbora, what's going on? Why are you not writing anymore? I said, I had enough of writing A's and B's. I'm not doing it anymore. And then I had to call my mom and to go give school.
So again, you'd be called a difficult child, but you
I was a difficult child.
Part of it's a theme on all these podcasts. A lot of the people who've been on here have done that, because actually, what schooling is corralling people to conform. So anybody who is different finds it tough. And then, of course, in the last 20 years, everyone's got ADHD and they give them drugs. Totally. But actually, what they probably are just creative people who can't fucking fit into the bullshit of
people
of conformity.
Just work differently. We're unique creatures, every one of us, and I think everyone learns different, and I think schools don't cater for that. It's catered for like a really small margin of people, and then all the rest of us are just sort of mad ADHD or whatever they want to call it. Yeah, but back
I hate that though, because it's almost like society labeling kids, put them all in the one box and feed them drugs and suppress them,
totally,
you know, it's not good. So anyway, you're 16 and then you went, what, right, enough.
So I had my little suitcase, and then when I was 16, it's kind of a mad story. Basically, I won a tombola in my first year of high school.
So a tombola is a lottery.
Yeah. And it was a free French course to learn French for 6. It was in 2 parts. You got the first part free. It was 6 months kind of intensive French course.
Yeah.
And then if you saved up or if your parents had money, you go to Paris for the summer and do like the second part of the course with like a lot of young students from all over the world. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I did the course and everything. And I had a job. I used to work in the bar at the time, you know, like in Slovakia.
Yeah. But you were saving money for this second part of the course.
I was saving money. I was going to go to Paris, and I was, you know, I was doing French, but I didn't quite have enough money.
Right.
So, and you know, my mum was a single parent, so I just sort of crawled up to my dad and was begging him for some money, but it's never quite easy to get any cash off my dad. Right. So he was like, no, I'm not giving you any money, but I've got some family over there, some distant relatives.
Over in America?
Yeah, who obviously ran away from communism, and also even before that, people went on the big ships to go over to America. The
Irish were famous for it.
Yeah, exactly, to find work. So he had relatives there that he didn't know very well, but he said, I've been in contact with them, and if you have enough for a ticket to go. Right. And I was like, but I don't speak English. So I remember that.
Oh, you didn't speak English?
No.
Wow.
So me and my friends were sitting there thinking, oh my God, it's catastrophe. What are you going to do? And at the time, I had like my first boyfriend, and he really disappointed me, and we split up and everything. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? Just sit here, be miserable? Or I'm just going to go. So I got a ticket to San Francisco.
Mental. At 16?
Yeah.
With no English?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went over there. And it's surprisingly, actually, kind of in a way I'm lying that I didn't know English, because I was translating the songs, because I was always at the singing. And I always wanted to know, because I just mime. And then I'd always translate words to know. So when I got there, I've actually realised that
you had a bit.
I had some words. Yeah. I knew some words, but I'd never studied it.
Your English is perfect now.
Yeah. But I did go through Cambridge University.
Okay. We'll come to that. But basically, yes, I went over there,
And I remember when I got picked up at the airport, I had this old British dictionary. So it was like British English.
Collins
and there was quite
dictionary.
a few hiccups, like
Yeah.
where Americans would be looking at me going, what is that word even? And they picked me up. And I remember that there was...
What was your first feeling when you landed in the
I was just
land
thinking,
of the free?
what am I going to do here? Like, I don't know anything. I can't speak the language. But in a way, it was... I had a really good time, and it changed my life completely. And I am where I am because of that decision I've made. But, like... I remember getting picked up, and the guys who were staying, was proper hippies. They were quite old, but they were, you know, they lived in Virginia and, you know, in the forest, and they had long hair. They're proper old school hippies. And he picked me up and he was like, what's up? Welcome to California.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's up? I look in my dictionary, what's up? And I'm thinking, what's up? Literally, like, he must be talking about the flight or something, because, like, up in the air.
Up in the air, yeah.
I'm
Brilliant.
just, like, no idea about slang or anything. But it's all...
Were you scared?
No.
Were you? It was a big adventure.
If I think about it, I think that's proper mad.
Yeah,
but,
I know. Yeah,
At the time,
I'm thinking that. Yeah.
At the time, I was just like, oh, whatever.
Was
An
your
adventure.
mother thinking she'll be back next week?
Oh yeah. My mum and dad, and she was really actually very, and you know, I'm so thankful to my mother, because she's always let us kind of do what we wanted to do and gave us the freedom. I think other parents would be like, come home now.
Yeah.
And after a couple of months, I was like, I'm not going back to Slovakia. Are you joking? Like, you know, I've come to a land where everyone's surfing and smoking weed and very liberal.
Did you get a job or
liberal view? Yeah, but I was a legal immigrant.
Yeah, that's
nice.
right,
It was all like, it's well dodgy in there. And it was a struggle, to be honest with you, in the first year. And at one point, I almost come back because I tried to change from tourist visa to different visa, and I couldn't do it, and it was really difficult. And I couldn't. I tried to get people to be my guardians, but you know, the American government was not having
it's very
any.
difficult. Yeah,
was not having any of it. So
did you have to jump in and out after 3 months, or did you just stick it and sell?
No, I got married. To my boyfriend, and we were in love at the time, and I met him straight away, and you know, we fell in love, and we were together. So obviously, we probably wouldn't have gotten married straight away. And sadly, he passed away now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But we got married, and and then I stayed, and
how long did you stay there for?
I was there almost 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you.
But then we got divorced, and then I felt a bit isolated because.
So you got an American green card then, did you?
I did, yeah, but because you get the green card and then you kind of have like a probation period with it, and you can't leave for longer than 3 months or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember, and I just fucked off, and you know, after that I was just like, you know what, United States, just have it. I don't want to be there anymore. So I just left, and some people would have thought I was mad. I should have stayed along, but I think as well because.
But after like 2 or 3 years, where you were able to speak English, you were married.
I spoke English in 2 months.
In 2 months, right?
I went to an American high school in 2 months. And graduated with straight A's. It was mental. I think if you're forced into a situation like that, and there's no other option, because there's nobody speaking Slovakian over there. Like these relatives that my dad had, they were like descendants, so they didn't speak Slovakian. So I was over there completely.
Sink or swim.
Sink or swim, yeah. And the mad thing was, I remember going to the high school and having an interview. They did this test, obviously like mathematics, and they tested me on all kinds of subjects. And then they said, you don't need to go to high school anymore. But that's how bad the American education system is.
Yeah, you were way ahead of them.
You know what I mean? I was like, I've only done 1 year of high school in Slovakia. And they were like, I was like, wicked, I don't have to go. This is the best
But you did go.
I've ever. Well, I had to, because you either, in order to go to university, you either had to be 18 or have graduation. So they said to me, come for the last year and graduate.
Really?
So I literally like skipped years. And
so the Americans were calling you gifted.
I was gifted in the name of like knowledge, but I wasn't really gifted in the name of being kind of an outsider immigrant. Like I was pretty isolated over there, and none of the American kids really wanted to play or any of that. And so we had like a little gang of like some Serbian kid and, you know, Albanian and me. And that was us, the three of us.
And what age
Immigrant
did you get?
gang.
What age were you when you got married?
I was 17.
Wow. And what was the marriage like? Was it the wedding? Was it?
I had to have my mum's permission. Because I was I mean, the wedding, it was just me and my husband and a witness, and then we had a little party in the garden.
Right.
His mum and his dad really wanted to have a massive party and do a proper wedding because they really loved me, and I'm still in touch with all of them.
Okay.
But he was a bit freaked out by the whole thing. I think he was like, no way. So we just had a really small wedding.
Right.
But I remember going down to the interview at the immigration office, and we're in the car, and I was like, remember, 13th of August, that's when we got married. And we sit down, and the first thing she asked him, and she's like, when did you get married? And he's like, 11th of August. And I looked at him and I was like, you're an idiot. And then we had like a little argument, and she was like, oh, you definitely look like a married couple. Yeah.
you then got into college in America?
Well, I was admitted to UC Davis, which is a really good university, to study marine ecology. That's kind of where I started to do a bit of singing. A friend of mine had a band and I did some backing vocals. And I remember I did the backing vocals for this band called Azebo Tribe. And we've opened up at the Petaluma Theatre for the Black Eyed Peas before they've become massive.
Wow.
So, yeah, and that was...
What year are we now?
Oh, God, this is like 2000, year 2000.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I was kind of, because my husband he studied environmental science and he actually also did work doing diving for like environmental projects. He really inspired me. And a lot of the people I met over there, obviously it's the Redwood Forest, is such a biodiverse place. And a lot of his friends were ecologists, and me coming from that kind of background of growing up in the woods anyway, it was like, that seemed kind of a thing. And normally in the States, it's like you can either go to university for the 4 years or you can do the first 2 years in a college because it's cheaper. Because at the time, we didn't have loads of money. I just opted for the college option. And in the end, our marriage broke down and everything turned really sour. And I could have stayed, but I've just decided that I just didn't want to be that far away from my family. And so then I left, basically. So I did the general education. I never finished my degree there. And I left and I came back to Europe. I ended up in London, another English-speaking country.
Right.
Slovakia was a bit too boring for me, I think.
This is a good chapter end when you move to England, and a good point to maybe introduce one of your songs for our listeners. So why don't you do that?
Yeah, so the song is from the latest album of the Heliocentrics, A World of Masks is called. And
there'll be a link to A World of Masks and how to buy it at the blurb of the podcast.
It's a single that was released first, and it's called Made of the Sun. It's a kind of a ballad.
Here it is.
Every piece of the puzzle falls into one. I'm made of the flesh, I'm made of the sun. Sketchbook falls wide open, just feel like a child. How could we be different? Born to be one. My seed are inside. She's so slow to grow. Coming to fruit now. Where I know I felt your presence right from the start. No more a stranger.
So that was the Heliocentrics, Made of the Sun. Now, this band is does something that I haven't even heard about, but it's known for being a kind of a live improv type of band, right? And you've come along and you do a lot of improvised jams as well, which must be, I don't know how you even begin to do that. In reviews, your versatility as a singer is something that people talk about.
Yeah.
Like you've got an operatic ability and you've got Dusky Lounge Room and you've got this. So tell me a little bit about the way you sing and the way that you improvise these things, and how does that all work when you're with the band?
So yeah, I mean, the Heliocentrics, they've been around for a very long time. When I got approached by a friend who knows them and who said they're looking for a singer, I didn't actually know of them. And when I went to check them out, I was like, what? How come I don't know about these guys?
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, I think personally they're the best underground music that's happening in the UK right now.
So they were set up by a guy called Malcolm Cato.
Malcolm Cato, yeah.
Who's a drummer and a producer, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's like a total legend.
Yeah.
He's a drummer and a producer. He runs a Quartermass Lab Studios.
Which is an old
analog,
analog.
massive analog studio. Yeah, they've got the wicked, they've got the tapes and all the old school equipment and valve mics, and they're definitely going for that old school kind of sound. Yeah, they can jam basically, they can just go for hours, and there's a kind of a growth in the band now where they want to show that they are capable of structure and structured songs. So I think that a lot of the stuff we do now is still groove outs, but also structured songs as well.
Well, we'll hear some more of the music during the podcast, but one of the things when I was listening to some, just in my research for this, because as I said at the top of the podcast, it's a very new area for me to be diving into, was when I hear them, I go, is every concert different? There was a quote I read, which was, I think it was from Malcolm, I'm not sure, for anything to happen, it must be at that time for the people in the room, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
They talk about music that's impossible to write. But when you've done your gig, do you ever come off going, no, we fucked up that bit? Or,
Oh, yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, we definitely do that kind of whole analysis where, like, quite often when we're on a tour, we actually record the gigs from the desk and then we listen back to them and, analyse what worked and what didn't.
Yeah.
And I always hate that bit because it's so weird listening to I love being there in the moment, but when you actually...
But there are some times when you go up on stage and you just let it go, right? Whatever comes into your head.
Yeah, I mean... Basically, like when I went on tour with them the first time around, there was a lot of improvisation. Some of the songs on the album, like "Oh Brother," which we can play later. That song is what happened in the studio. We just got together.
Yeah.
I had some lyrics that I've written a long time ago, and they just played. And I was in the other room, so I obviously because I'm doing the vocals, so I was separate from the band, but we can see each other through glass. And they just grooved, and I sang. And that was that. That's the song. Like what you hear there is what happened there and then. That's really like.
So for them, you must have been a sort of a muse who just walked into, because it must be very hard for traditional vocalists to be brave enough to go into that kind of scenario. And
but maybe it's because I wasn't trained in music, and I just come from my own little world of what I've been up to. And I've always sang my songs to other people's songs, and I've always made things up. And I don't actually play apart from I play an instrument, which is my own voice. I don't actually play. I don't know music. I don't read music in that sense. Like I'm not trained. But I do remember when we met the first time. I met them in the studio because obviously they've auditioned for people, and I've come down there like with my little effects pedal. And I was very intimidated because I've never been in a band with actual loads of people playing.
It's very rare I think for anyone to say intimidation is a word that would apply to you. You seem to be fearless.
Like, oh my God, there's real musicians. I know. Because I was, at the time, I did have this little band. We're called Puncture Sluts. It's a bit of a rude name, but we're like an electronica trio. And there's three of us. Live drums, a guy doing he had a DJ mixer, and so he was doing like effects and stuff on a mixer, and then he was playing bass and I was singing. It was a really small setup and more electronic than like having loads of instruments. And there was like 6 or 7 people in the room, and I just rocked up there and I was like, oh. And I've listened to all their music, and I when you sort of listen
kind
to
of crowd music, is that what it's called, or sort of a bit of that, or
their music? I don't know.
No?
It's a bit of, to be honest with you, it's really hard to pin down what it is, because they've released jazz albums, Afrobeat albums,
psych and all that.
Psych, and it's a bit crowd rock sometimes. It's a bit of a mixed bag, and I think that's what makes it so amazing. And my friends who've come to the gigs were just like, that is the best thing I've heard in ages, because it's so different from anything I've heard.
It's mesmerizing. I mean, the stuff I've seen, there's a lot of stuff, if you type in Heliocentrics into, say, YouTube, you'll see a lot of the live performances, which are just mesmerizing.
And it's very much more a kind of about being an immersive experience. So we've got the visuals, and like we almost don't like doing gigs without the visuals because it's really important. But when I first met them and I walked into the room and they said, okay, so we're just going to play something and you just trying to do something to it. And I was like, okay. And then played, and I had my pedal and did the Slovakian song. And I just sang, and then I just thought, wow, this works really amazingly. And, you know, we finished it, we looked at each other, and then they called me up and they said, Wicked, do you want to come on tour? And 5 weeks later, I'm like touring Europe, and like 2 months later, I'm singing in Japan. I was just like getting paid. I was like, this is amazing. So yeah, and then I'm just like a permanent member now.
So let's work up to how you got into that room with them. You've arrived in England, and you wanted to be in an English-speaking country, and Slovakia was boring. What did you do when you landed in England?
Well, I had a friend here, and we ended up actually then going out together for 8 years. And he's my best mate still, and I'm godmother to his children, even though we're not together. Basically, I got here and I went to study. I wanted to continue on this ecology thing. But when I came to England with my general education degree from the United States, they laughed at me. They were like, oh! So I had the reversal of like, I went to the States and they were like, oh, you never have to go to school again. And then I came back with the American education to England, and they were like, you
might as well tear that up, honey.
So I had to go back to do A-levels.
Oh boy.
I know, and this is, I'm like 23 or something, so I'm just like, oh.
But you did it.
Yeah, I went back.
Look at the person who the teachers said, oh, she's not good at school, and how you were able to
well, no, the thing is, I went to Southern College, and it was a funny college. You know, half the time we didn't have teachers, and I was the one who got everyone to sign a petition to say we don't have to go and do the attendance, because if we've got some guy sitting there who's got no clue about chemistry, why should I pay £3 on the bus to go there and sit in a class where I'm just doing my own studies anyway? So I did the A-levels. I've got all straight A's. I said, I'm going to apply to Cambridge. They were like, no, don't do it. You're not going to get in. It's a waste of time. Like my own teachers were going, don't do it. And I was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't care what you say. Yeah, I had an interview that was sort of, I thought it went catastrophically bad. Right. I remember that. I remember coming out of the interview, there was still time in the time of telephone boxes and calling people on landlines. I called my boyfriend and started going, I'm definitely not getting in. Went to the pub, had 3 shots of vodka.
Though, what the sort of conformity of Cambridge and the conformity of British public school education, what was the appeal to someone like you of that?
Because they were the only degree where it was called natural sciences, and it was the only degree in the whole country where you could combine physics, chemistry and biology. And I thought the idea of mixing different subjects together broadens the horizons of what you can achieve and how you can view a situation. So hence that's why I chose that degree, because it was the only degree that did that. Because I left home when I was 16, I was perceived as an orphan. So they gave me a full bursary. They waived all my fees. They waived the Cambridge fees. And they gave me a scholarship to go. Wow. So I thought, if I get on that wagon, I don't have to pay any fees. I'll get actual bursary to be there. Every week you get to meet with the experts in the field. And it's only 2 or 3 of you, and you get to ask them questions. And I thought, that is like the best for me in terms of education. I mean, I didn't like the sort of mood of Cambridge.
Well, that's what I was thinking. What were you thinking when you first walked through the hallowed halls?
After the first year, I wanted to leave. If it wasn't for my boyfriend at the time who was saying, look, you've worked so hard to get here, you did the whole A-levels, man, you've got the best. So he's like, just stay. And I was like, I hate this place. All my mates were actually from outside the college, and then I ended up forming an all-girl band. And that was kind of like my first actual band I was in. And I really hated it. But in the end, I kind of just thought, I'm just going to do my thing, because I love my subjects, and I just read loads about the subjects, and I skipped loads of lectures as well. And in the end, whatever, I didn't get a first, but I got a 2-1 or something. I did all right. I didn't do the formal halls, because they've got this thing, the formal hall, where everyone gets in the gowns, and the college subsidizes like fancy dinners, and they're all sitting there smoking cigars,
I could imagine you just being a square peg in that round.
And I was like, what's wrong with you? Or like, where's the party? Like, where's the party? Where's the drugs? But they were like, oh, doing some choral singing, whatever. But it wasn't my cup of tea.
So you came out of Cambridge with a 2-1 degree in ecology. And what were you going to do then?
I went for my first job interview. And I didn't get the job, but they liked me so much that they created a position for me. in the company. I didn't have the experience for the job because it was working for a youth charity that was dealing with sort of inspiring young people to get into environmental issues and social justice stuff. So it was very related to my subject, but more in communication. Because I realized when I went there that actually I'm not a good scientist. I'm not good at analyzing data. I find as soon as I have to analyze data, I'm really good at communicating the beauty of nature and the inspiration. Like, you know, when you get a scientist and they're really nerdy and they can't quite explain the science, but I could really tell you because I just had a different way of viewing it. So again, the communication and inspire people about nature and environment and technology. So I got this job, and obviously because I don't like authority, that wasn't going to last very long because I also just wanted to be the boss or my own boss. So I ended up getting a big job to do this. It was really random. My friend was working as an art curator at the Picture Festival, and I had this mad idea about this cinema that you ride in on bicycles and you hook the bikes up and you power the cinema. And she was like, "That's an awesome idea. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "You're joking." She's like, "Yeah, we can give you like £10,000."
Wow!
So I found some scientists in Cambridge and we did it. And
so what was on the screen when you started cycling?
Just a movie, short films. We've got loads of people to do short independent films from all over UK and the world.
So when no one's in the room, there's nothing on, and then you have to get in and get on.
Yeah, and everyone gets in.
Is it like a kind of a gym bike?
Yeah. And we had the usherettes waving people and giving them water and lollipops.
And how many bikes were in the room?
We had 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did that, and then out of that, loads of schools and places got in touch and said, "This is a really good projecting to talk to people about renewable energy, and especially kids because they're very physical and it's a way for learning." And it kicked off, and then I started getting paid to take it to school assemblies and stuff. So then I set up a company to do workshops and art projects because I thought this is really cool. Let's communicate with kids, but in a more fun way, not like someone's just talking at you and going, "Don't use this much electricity because it's bad for the environment." But let's do something fun. That's physical. So then I set up my own company and did that for a few years. And I had an office at the Hackney City Farm here, and I got a grant to take put a shipping container in the farm, sort of clad it with wood and put a green roof on it, and I had an office there. At one point, it was about 3 of us working full time for the company, and it was amazing because we had an office in the heart of Hackney, and we were literally sharing the pigsty. Because when you looked out, there was these 2 massive ginger pigs. We were sharing and then you saw the donkeys and the chickens, and then But I gave all that up because the singing was kind of becoming I was starting to get paid, and then I've realized actually singing's where my heart's at. It's where my heart's at. That's really truly who I am. I'm a performer. I'm a person to stand there and really connect with people and communicate through the form of music. I think that's where it's at for me. So let's
hear another one of your tunes.
Yeah, I'd like to play "Oh Brother."
Oh Brother, as you talked about earlier.
This is the track I talked about earlier. As you hear it, that's what happened there and then.
Heliocentrics, "Oh Brother." Okay, so that was Oh Brother by the Heliocentrics, and don't forget you can buy their new album, A World of Masks, on the links at the end of the podcast. We're now at the time when you've just decided music is your heart's desire.
Yes.
And we've covered earlier how you sort of first introduced yourself to this band, but how did they find you?
Well, they didn't find me. I think I kind of... basically, I lived on a boat in London for quite a few years.
On a barge?
Yeah.
You're the second person I've had on the podcast who lived on a barge.
Yeah. And
Jamie McIver.
And at one point, my mum moved to England as well, and she lived on a little boat. And my mum is a really amazing cook. She used to run a lot of restaurants. And so I used to get temporary events notices, and we'd turn my mum's boat into like a cafe.
Right.
She'd be cooking goulash at the back of the boat. And we turned my wheelhouse into a bar, and then I have bands on my deck.
Great.
And so we just used to put on parties in the summer, every few weeks we'd do it around the park. And I used to sometimes put up a screen, so we had like a visuals and cinema as well after the music. Julia, who also lives on the boat, who obviously come to one of the events, saw me singing. And her kid goes to school with Malcolm Cato's son.
Okay.
So this was like a primary school deal.
Amazing. Amazing.
That's standing there in the courtyard of the primary school, and he's kind of going, if you know any singers, we're looking for someone to take on tour. And she's like, saying that, I've seen this girl, she lives in a boat, and she's using a pedal, and I think she'd be really cool for you guys. Yeah. And so she gave me their number, and she said, call these guys. And I called them up, and 5 weeks later I was touring.
So what was it like when you first went out touring?
It was amazing, but it was also quite scary because some of the gigs were quite big, thousands of people. Yeah. And I remember about my 4th gig was Giles Peterson's festival for his label Worldwide in Set. I wouldn't say I was petrified. I'm never really petrified, but you definitely get a few butterflies in there.
I bet.
I remember getting a special thanks of him at the end because he was like, this is only her 4th gig.
But it's amazing the people who've been reviewing and who are, the Heliocentrics as a band. And a line I read somewhere which was, you're the almost missing link that you've elevated, that, you brought something really, a whole new layer to them. It's astonishing the sliding doors aspect of your life where just there's all these things that pop up and you jump on them and you grab them, and a lot of people would be afraid of doing stuff like that, or they'd fear it wouldn't work, or they wouldn't be good enough. And
fear is the only thing that stops you, isn't it? I really do think there's only 2 forces that work in this world, and it's love and fear. And you're either fear or you love, and if you love, you have nothing to lose because you love life. And this is the thing, like what I just told you, like a funny couple of weeks and I've been feeling a bit down. It's really unusual for me because I'm a total lover of life, like life is amazing and we are here to take on these opportunities. When they arise, jump for it, go for it. What can happen? It's a learning process. I've done loads of things I failed in. I failed bands, failed projects, failed general education degree, and then I had to go back. And in the end, it took me 7 years to get a bachelor's degree, but I thought I was ahead. And with the Heliocentrics, it's a weird one because when I go on tour with them, we're just like old mates. Like I was a bit afraid of that because I was thinking, I'm going to go tour with all these men that I don't know. And in the end, they're all just like my brothers. It's just a different kind of vibe. It's like we really work very well together, and it just reflects itself in the music as well. When I'm in the rehearsal, I look around and just think, is this real? I've landed in, for me, possibly the best band there is for me, because I have my own free creative reign, because I was really afraid. I joined a band and I have to, because I'm not a proper trained musician, I have to repeat the things the same way. And even though I'm better at that now, and I can do that now. But before I was a bit like, do that on an offbeat. And I'd be like, what? And so, because there's so much free reign and creativity, and because, on the World of Masks, I've written all the lyrics and I've written all the melodies. It's my work, and I think there's a different approach when something is a piece of your thing. You feel better ownership over it, and you feel more motivated and inspired, and that's kind of how we work. Like, I get to write my own stuff. Obviously, Malcolm is like the father of the operation, so if I do something he doesn't like it, he'll be like, I don't like that. Then I go do something else. And the thing is, at first, I think I see some musicians who work with us, find that really quite frustrating. For me, this is a growing process, and I push my own boundaries.
But you clearly have so much trust in him, because he's the visionary of the band, and he, even for someone of his stature and standing, to take an untried, for them to do that was amazing as well. So there's obviously this great trust between you, and I mean, the word telepathy comes out a little bit as well, where you guys all seem to, and it must be very hard for a band like that to find the piece of the jigsaw as
Well,
well.
that's it. I mean, they said they was looking for singer for years, but they had a lot of people come in, because some of the critics, they said that sometimes I'm like an instrument.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when I'm not in instrumentals, people must think I'm there, but I'm not, because there's some kind of instrument that sounds a bit like me. And it's like, I'm not necessarily want to be like, I'm the front person of this band, you know. I don't mind being an instrument, because really that's what voice is, you know. And I think definitely like Malcolm's got a dominant role in the band, but everyone's also got a creative input. And if someone comes with a song, you know, he's willing to try everything. And, you know, it's like, I deeply admire the person and all the rest of the people in the band. Actually, you know, they're really amazing musicians who've been doing this for years. You know, I'm like a novice comparing to all of them. So even though I've got like probably quite a big ego as well, sometimes I'm like, oh.
Yeah, but I don't see that in you. I see a almost a curiosity and people with big egos tend to only do what their ego permits them to do, and I don't see that in you. I see sort of a kind of there's a child in you that goes, yep, I'm interested in that, and I go after this, and that's very different.
I said that recently, actually. I did a little post on my Facebook, and that's exactly what it was, is that my motto at the moment is I want to be like a child. Yeah. Because when you see kids, how much they enjoy something, and they just fly into stuff. They want to try everything. And
curiosity, you know.
Why do we lose that? As we grow, we should always have that child within us. And, you know, people say like, oh, don't be like a child. And it's like, actually be like a child. Yeah. If we were all a bit more like a child, because, you know, children forgive each other. Yeah. They don't sit there.
They don't play politics.
Brewing.
Well, even in business, like when I worked in the advertising industry for too long, you know, I used to joke, if some of the guys who I worked with and girls brought their kids in, they'd probably be able to solve our problems much quicker and much more creatively than we are, because we're too following the bloody traditions. What's the future holding for you? You found your purpose?
Yeah, just going to do music. I mean, it's tough because it doesn't earn very much money. So I've struggled actually since I've given up my company and have been doing loads of other work, like whatever comes and gives money that's not necessarily music, but I'm trying to find my way of. I'm really good at writing the lyrics, so I'm trying to see if I can do some lyric writings for people and more stuff like that. But me and my partner, because he's a music producer, we started a project together that's more electronic. I was in a wicked little band that I told you about earlier, but we've split up because how it is with bands is that quite often people have other jobs. I did come to realize that I have to be in the struggle, because if I just get another job now, I'm not really being true to what I'm doing, and I really got to just stick with it. And even though it's super tough sometimes, and I have to lend money off mates, and sometimes people see the pictures of you on a big stage and they're like, wow, you've really
you're
made... You're a rock star. But it's like, you know, I had my mates to buy me gas the other day and invited them for dinner. And
no, my friend, my friend Gavin, who's a musician in Ireland, who he said that the music industry is like the compressor in Star Wars, and the things are closing in, and you just keep on doing your art, but you haven't got any money and you don't know what to do. I've now got 2 kids and or whatever, you know, and it's like it's really hard, man. It's also the collapse of the music industry, where it's now not about record sales, and you know, nobody buys records or albums and really anymore at the sort of levels that they used to, and it's all about performance, and you have to be great and big to get lots of money from performance. And
exactly.
It's a doom loop spiral.
And if you're in a band that has 8 members, then even if you get decent money, once you split it, between everyone, it's absolutely nothing.
What about away from music? What's your view on the world?
My view on the world is just stay positive. Most of the view that we see is twisted. I think if you pay too much attention to all the bad news, your heart freezes in cynicism. That's why I think, like, do loads of psychedelics and loads of things to open your mind.
Do you try to ignore the news, or do you embrace it?
No, I don't try to ignore the news, but I try to take the news with a pinch of salt. When is there positive news on the news? Like,
Rarely.
You don't really see the BBC talking about, like, you know, Musk's new, you know, that project with these trains that are in the vacuum, or the vehicles that are in the vacuum. They can go
the Paraloop thing.
Man. I mean, you know, you can travel half an hour from New York to Washington, and this is technology that doesn't really need fossil fuels. You know, we can power houses with these Tesla batteries now, and technology's there. The only thing that's stopping us is just old ways of looking at the world. But I really do believe that the conscience is changing. Everything's coming out, and people are a lot more open to see the world for what it is, and it is happening alongside all the crap that's happening. But I think the crap just gets more cred because
there's a positive spin on the whole Trump Brexit climate change thing. Is that there's an awakening happening. This is fucking getting out of control.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm really intrigued to see if Trump lasts, which I don't think he will, because I think he's a guy walking across a landmine, and he seems to be avoiding these landmines. Someday he's going to step on one. It's going to blow him into a million pieces, I hope.
Yeah.
But then who comes after him? The galvanization of people coming out to vote. Even the Corbyn performance in the last election, where inequality is one of the biggest issues. It's the same in my country, in Ireland.
Yeah.
People's voices are starting to be louder, and it might end up in pitchforks and flaming torches, but so be it. You know?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, chaos predecessors great things quite often, and
Indeed.
things do really need to break down for change to happen, isn't it? It's like a relationship that just got to go... Because when you're in it, you can't quite see what's going on, and sometimes it just really needs a good shake-up. Change is with every person. The society where we live in and the way the world works now is people don't have the time to reflect. The society is ill because people don't have space to develop love for themselves that they can extend to the other parts of their life and the world. And I think that it's a bit more about spiritual development, and I'm not in a kind of like spiritual hippie or like religious sense, in more like a sense of there should be meditation, yoga, and healthy diet, and all this kind of stuff that is starting to penetrate our society and it's starting to become more mainstream. But I think that's really where it's at. I think it's in education and in changing how that works, because the way education works now is bringing people into the world that don't know what they love and they don't believe in themselves. If you don't believe in yourselves, you'll never believe in the future can be different, because how can you? It's all about the dream, isn't it? And someone told me before, like, if you don't think you're going to make it, if you have a doubt, if you have that door of doubt there, it always gives you a way out. But if you go, we can do this, we can, then we can.
My last question, what would you say to the 16-year-old self who was boarding the plane in Bratislava to go to San Francisco, if you go back and talk in her ear?
I say go for it. It's the right choice.
You're doing the right thing. Barbora Patkova, thank you so much for coming to Pint with Seaniebee. That was brilliant. I loved that conversation. Play us out with another song.
Okay, so this is the last one from the album, which is A World of Masks, and it is a one where I'm singing in Slovakian. So this is for any Slovakians out there who are listening.
Our new audience.
Thank you very much for having me.
What is the name of the song?
A World of Masks.
This is the title track from the album.
The title track is the last.
The best of luck with everything. You're such a great person.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.